With China and the United States going head-to-head over trade, Europe says it's calm heads that are needed to prevent economic turmoil. Warning against a full-scale trade war, Donald Tusk also included Russia, as President Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump meet in Finland.
It is a common duty of Europe and China, America and Russia, not to destroy this order, but to improve it. Not to start trade wars, which turned into hot conflict so often in our history. There is still time to prevent conflict and chaos.
While the EU has had disagreements with China about its trade policies, Trump's America First stance has pushed the two away from the US and closer to each other, as both are being hit by increased tariffs on key products. In Beijing, Tusk and Chinese Premier Li Keqiang are expected to pledge to uphold free trade and multilateralism in the global economy. The two leaders will also look to revive talks on increasing investments and discuss ways to improve rules at the World Trade Organization, with China looking to increase its influence at the trade body.
China and the EU are willing to talk about reforming the WTO on the basis that it maintains its basic principles and continues based on rules which continue to foster free trade.
We need new rules in the field of industrial subsidies, intellectual property and forced technology transfers, reduction of trade costs, as well as a new approach to development and more effective dispute settlement.
With US tariffs expected to hurt China's economic growth, China will want to step up efforts to open up its economy and strengthen trade ties with its allies. The Chinese economy expanded 6.7% in the second quarter, down slightly from 6.8% in the previous one. While growth was in line with market expectations, it was its slowest pace since 2016, and any negative impact of the trade war could increasingly show in the coming months, unless calm heads do prevail. Laila Humairah, TRT World.
TRT World's editor-at-large Craig Copetas has more.
What's going on with the EU and China stems around Trump's remarkable statement in which he called the European Union America's foe. We've never heard rhetoric or language like that before. It's very clear that the Chinese are going to use that. They're going to probably offer separate deals to the EU, perhaps better trade agreements in order to further isolate the United States. That's where that is going. And there's a lot of businessmen and quite a few diplomats in Europe today who I've spoken with so far who cannot believe that the President of the United States called the European Union America's foe. It's unheard of.
Let's get more now with Fraser Cameron. He's the director of the Brussels-based think tank EU Asia Centre. Fraser, great to have you on the show. Let's talk about this EU trip to China. Donald Tusk, Jean-Claude Juncker are both over there. What is the EU trying to achieve in this, and what are the prospects of them achieving it?
Well, to some extent, it's the same aim as China, namely to preserve the multilateral trading system from the onslaught by a very unpredictable American president. That's why the two have agreed to set up a working group to consider reforming the WTO and open this up to the US, Russia, and others. So they're both very much on the same page, even though they have obviously some trade differences between them, but they now see themselves more like working together than working with what they would both call a rogue United States president.
So do you think that the EU is going to be able to get China to do what it wants while the US is in this massive trade war with China at the same time?
Well, neither the EU nor China want to engage in a lengthy trade war with the United States. I mean, the stakes are simply too high. But equally, they want to defend their own interests, and in some cases, the EU China will have shared interests, for example, in making the dispute settlement mechanism of the WTO work properly, and it's America that's blocking that just now. So where they can cooperate, they will cooperate, and where there are differences, they will try and manage them, because they both want to ensure that their own bilateral relationship is not a casualty of the transatlantic feuds.
Do you think it's any surprise that China is now deciding to take the US to the WTO?
No, they've actually taken the EU to the WTO as well, because the EU failed to grant them market economy status last year. So this is an example of the China pursuing the legal route. Obviously, when it suits its own interests, it doesn't always pursue the legal route.
This is, the curious thing, though, because the EU also has a lot of the same gripes against China that the US does. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, can the European Union get China to resolve those issues, intellectual property, not allowing European companies to play on a level playing field with Chinese companies? Can it get China to do all of these things?
Well, China's been very good on the rhetoric. You remember President Xi Jinping's speech at Davos 18 months ago. He made another speech at the Boa Forum earlier this year in terms of opening up. But I think now, some may argue it's too late. There are signs that the Chinese government do recognize the imperative of opening up in terms of market access, in terms of dealing with the issues that you've just raised, IPR theft, forced technology transfer, and so on. So I think if they don't do it now, faced with the onslaught from Trump, they will perhaps never do it. But I would put my money on China moving to open up its economy, because that is the only long-term way that China is really going to benefit from the next industrial revolution.
China has said that it's going to reply dollar for dollar against the tariffs that the US has imposed. That amount looks like it's going to hit 250 billion. It could hit 500 billion, which is the entire amount that the US is importing from China at the current rate. Beyond that, how can China retaliate if it wants to?
Well, it's got limited ways of doing it. I think it really wants to target the Trump states. That's obviously what it's doing in terms of the politics of the trade dispute, so that sufficient Republican governors, politicians will put pressure on Trump to reverse. And if they don't, they will suffer losses at the midterm elections in November. And that's obviously Trump's main concern, to ensure that the Democrats don't win back control of the House of Representatives in November. So that's the sort of short and medium-term strategy of China. Whether it's going to be effective or not, we have to wait and see.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Fraser Cameron of the EU Asia Centre. Thank you.